Hey, it's Tay Payton with the Beginner Drawing Course, and today we are going to be talking about the Loomis method for drawing heads. Let's get started. Essentially, you want to start with something like a sphere, and what he basically says is you chop this part off, right? So you kind of cut here, and that flattens this curve you're going to be seeing right here. So I'm going to do that, but first I'm going to also strike another line down the center. So as you can see, we're running into some size issues here just because my canvas is not big enough. So make that a little smaller. And all the lines that we just struck, aside from our basic circle here, are not needing to be perfect at this point. We're going to redraw over them anyway. So essentially what I am going to do next is cut off this portion by striking another line that's more straight down, and that lets me see that this surface right there is going to be flattened out because we don't have perfectly circular or orb-like heads. So that already allows me to have these two lines start to connect up by striking another line across this surface, and this is what he calls the brow line. Next, we're going to go and kind of cut the difference between this bottom of the sphere here and this brow line, and this is going to be our nose line. And now you can see we're running into the edge right here, this edge of our sphere, so it's kind of a good idea to kind of bring it down a little further because we need to have a chin as well. And you want to make sure that all these lines that we're striking in the sort of diagonal way here are matching up with each other in terms of their angle. So you don't want a line like this, for example, or a line like that, because the chin is going to be crooked based on your guide. So it's got to be pretty close to the same angle. They've got to be pretty parallel. So at least in this form of perspective we're using, but we'll get more into perspective in other lessons. At any rate, we have the brow line, we got the nose line, and we got the chin line. And in between the nose line and the chin line is going to be the mouth line about halfway through. So this is sort of our head right here. You can tell it's not really much at this point, but it is enough to help us situate the other parts of the face. So for example, with the brow line, we know that the brow line around the orbicular sockets, or the eyes, kind of goes in. So let's cut that part away right here. I'm not going to take it away completely. I'll just sort of erase it lightly so that we have some room to put some eyes in. Now the eye shapes can be whatever you want, but I always recommend for beginners sort of a trapezoid kind of shape, you know, and you want to make sure that it's one eye distance apart. So as you can see, from here to here is about that long. So we want to do something similar for that to that. So let's use our trapezoid shape again. And now we have sort of a rough outline for some eyes, where we can place some eyes. And this is pretty flat. You see this line right here, it's fairly flat where the nose is going to go, but noses typically aren't flat against the face. They're protruding. You know, they're probably one of the furthest things from the face. Like if you drew a face from the side, you drew a profile, the brow line goes in, the nose line goes out, and then you have the nose line going in again, the lip lines, and then the chin line. This is for a male head. So the eyes are also going to be sort of a V shape, sideways V shape. Forehead's a little big, but we can just kind of adjust that. It's a lot of drawing and erasing. So this right here is sort of how it goes. There's ins and there's outs, there's concave and convex. It's just what you sort of think of and what I teach in my beginner drawing course as you're learning to draw, to know where things are going to go in and where things are going to go out. So this is part where it goes out, and the nose line right here is going to go out as well. So let's just go ahead and drop in the ball of the nose here, and I'll just make another kind of trapezoidy shape. And then we have the nostril wings. So those lead into the bridge of the nose, what is called the nose bridge. And remember, the brow ridge goes in, so we're going to be going back into the head at this point. And we want to take another line, put it right there, so that we can, again, give the appearance that we're drawing on the form. Now, if you're feeling uncomfortable at this point with drawing on the form, I really recommend you do a lot of shape-based sketching, so drawing circles or egg shapes and drawing on those forms first, you know, drawing your cubes, testing out your shapes, building those foundations. You know, this one's a little wonky, but it's like you basically just have to do a ton of this. It's like practicing dribbling a basketball, or practicing staying upright while riding a bike, or using your brakes. These are all super simple, basic things that you need to do naturally, and they come more naturally when you do them consciously. There's focus and there's diffuse modes of learning. So focus is when you're being very conscious of it, and diffuse is when you're kind of like watching TV or listening to music and doing it a little in the background, or not doing it at all after focusing for quite some time. So that is a concept from the book Mind for Numbers, which is a great book for learning to learn. So anyway, back to the Loomis head, we will start to get rid of this line here, because when lines are very stark, when they're very, very dark and easy to see, they start to come forward to us. So it makes it difficult to really see the other lines we want to be making that are closer to the final lines, the final drawing. I'm going to flip this to just double check proportions. I see that one eye is a little bigger than the other, so I'll just go ahead and scale that down. What I just did here is I struck a diagonal line to help denote where the cheekbone is going to be, because you see we flattened this side of the head, and I'm sure you're wondering where the ear is. So the ear actually runs underneath in alignment with the nostrils, and the bottom of the ear matches up with the bottom of the nostrils. So the ear can, again, everything's just sort of a pretty basic shape, and it's kind of trapezoidal, but the ear and the nose bottom line up. So that's an easy way to get that down. It's a bit of a small ear, but it doesn't need to be huge. Next we have the jawline. So you saw we struck a line through this part that we had quote unquote chopped off, right? Like there's like a floating bit over here that we're not using because we wanted the head to actually match closer to the proportions of a human skull, which typically isn't perfectly round. So we struck this line downward, and we've used it to figure out, okay, well the ear is here, but it's also helpful to know that from the bottom of the ear you can start to line up the jawline. So just push that line out a little bit further and go toward the chin line. And it doesn't have to line up perfectly with the chin line, but we wanted something to aim for. And now we're not going to just use it really round. That'll make for a quote-unquote fatter face, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I just mean that in a sense of, oh, there might be more body fat, or you might have more fat storage in the face that way. If it comes out as a convex line, you can have a diagonal line for a more chiseled face. That's kind of what we'll use in this instance. Now this is sort of a small chin. It's just a little bit narrow, so we might want to expand that a touch, and we might want to get rid of the lines we're not using, just let those fall back. This is very similar to how you'd be working this on paper, because you want to be, drawing things in very lightly when they're guides and striking lines until you get one that you like. So I'm also going and flipping this quite a bit because I want to make sure that I'm seeing it with fresh eyes when I'm drawing ahead, because I don't want things to get too out of hand and have to fix them all later. So we have this cheekbone on this side going down into the jaw here. Now it's not a very long jaw, it's a bit more of an adolescent head or somebody with a smaller build, because the proportions are not as low as we might want them. So I can take that and open that up a little more, just and extend that just a touch, because I'm working to idealize the proportions as I'm going. But you can have proportions wherever you want once you understand the formula. And now we can go ahead and draw in that mouth line, which again is halfway between the jaw line here and the nose line. So that's going to be right about here. And you can see that works really well. And the corners of the mouth I like to indicate with little dots, because that's where all of those muscles sort of meet, those muscles that allow us to make expressions. They kind of meet there and let us move the corners of our mouth to make various expressions. So I put those dots there, and then I use sort of an M shape for the upper lip. You can see I use that as a guide there, that mouth line we struck before. And then the bottom lip, you just kind of shade that in there. And if you shade this in, it looks like an upper lip, and if you don't shade it in, it looks like teeth. So it's just a matter of configuring these different these different shapes and putting them in proportion to one another to give the illusion of the thing we're trying to draw. So we're losing some dimension because we're flattening the face by having those guides be very apparent. So as you begin to erase some of your guides out, you can check the proportions some more. We got a little low here with the mouth, so I'll just move that up just a touch. There's a lot of adjustments for drawing the head, and you get better at it the more you do it. But this, in general, is a good basic way to start. Again, I might expand the jaw a little bit, and maybe I'll flip to double check that. Let's go to Edit in Photoshop and Transform, flip horizontal. And I can see that this is a little more appealing, so I'll fix those lines up. And so this is essentially the way that I learned the Loomis method to do the head. I don't use these guides anymore because I've drawn it so many times, and I just adjust on the fly based on trusting my eyes, which is something that you get used to as you draw more and more and do this more and more and set things up. You'll start to be able to just trust yourself with it, and it'll become second nature, like riding a bike or like, you know, something simple like cooking an egg or something. So don't get discouraged if your heads look wonky or you need to adjust them a lot. It's really just a matter of practice and getting that to be much more second nature. So this is essentially the way to construct the Loomis head, but let's just go ahead and go over it again with a couple different angles just to show how it works. So here's a circle, here's drawing those two lines that sort of help divide that circle into something that we can work with. And we know we have the brow line, the nose line, and the mouth line. And we can just go ahead and sketch in the jawline there. And this is a really rough kind of block in for something like that. And then we can roughen the eyes here, you know, kind of erase the nose line and adjust it. This is kind of how I end up doing it from just a lot of practice. And these are just the guides. You know, you can always add the little details or other shapes later based on the angle. Another one, we'll just go ahead and do that again. Strike it, strike the nose, strike the jaw, cut off that side bit there, sort of flatten that out. And then we'll go ahead, get to the jaw, push back up, use the brow line to kind of make our little very light V shape for the brow ridge and the cheekbone. Kind of double check our nose measurement there, put our mouth in, put our eyes in, whatever shape you want to make those. And then kind of move that back a little bit here and roughen the ear shape. Roughen the nose shape. I like to shade underneath it. Roughen the mouth shape and the ear shape as well. These eye shapes are different, so I'll have to go ahead and sketch it again until it's a little more symmetrical. You want to make sure that if you're going to mess up anywhere, don't let it be the face or eyes. So yeah, this one is a little bit wonky, so I'll just double check because I can see it even without flipping it. That we want to make sure we get that eye shape right. And again, if you don't erase those parts of the grid and use them very lightly, it can be difficult to place the shapes that you want to place and how you want to place them. It also bodes well not to have too little breathing room between the orbicular socket, which is where the eye goes, and the edge of the face there. So this face feels like it wants to be a bigger face. So I'll go ahead and do that. You can always keep adjusting these shapes to get the proportions you want. This one's a little more kid-like or youthful. I'll do some square eyebrows or whatever. Just kind of adjust that. So this one's a little more stylized. You can rough out a neck, which is a sort of cylindrical shape. It's not too different from that angle, so let's do one that's much more downward angle. So the first lines that you strike are really important because it's going to denote the angle that you're going to be working from. So let's just chop that bit off there and run this down again, run it back into a jawline. And this is essentially the simplest sort of format of it, where you just have those lines struck and you have the really basic sort of look at where the mouth would go. And you have to, of course, make the adjustment, because if we're looking at it from this angle, then the brow ridge might protrude more. So then you have the eyes kind of getting adjusted here. Erase, redraw. You see how quickly I let go of something that isn't working how I want it to work. I always encourage you to do that, especially in the early stages. You erase less and less as you're going once you like what you've got, but you want to make sure that things are proportionate, meaning that the different shapes and their relative sizes are believable and working in ways that are in alignment with reality. You also want to flip your canvas quite a lot and make the adjustments necessary to give yourself a strong basis to work from. So again, we can just kind of roughen some eyebrows and put in some ears, put in the neck. It's kind of a thinner neck, so probably not a very heavy set build. And you see the back of the head there. So this is a great way to start constructing heads. It's a great way to learn how to draw them from various angles. It just becomes more and more second nature the more you use it. It's kind of like playing a scale on an instrument, you know, the same scale over and over, and then you start to make different melodies from the same scale. You start to play some of the notes at the same time, and you start to figure out what chords exist in that scale. So everything starts to evolve the more that you use it and the more you get comfortable with it. So go ahead and drop in the cheekbone and the brow ridge there. Keep making adjustments, keep getting rid of the lines that are making it harder to draw the shapes I want to draw. And put in my mouth line, the lower lip line, upper lip line, kind of that M shape again that you can shade in quick. And go ahead and draw those eyebrows. I'm drawing a lot of male heads here. Maybe we'll do a female one next. You notice again, it's pretty easy to just drop in these rough shapes because I'm denoting them by drawing on the surface of things, because I can see the surface of things because I've drawn a lot of shapes and I've drawn on those shapes. So again, if you're not comfortable with that yet, you want to do a ton of that as well. That's one of the greatest drawing exercises you can do to get comfortable drawing on the forms of things, because then you lay your shapes in easier. You can adjust your shapes easier, all of that good stuff. So the Loomis head is a very, very useful technique for learning to draw heads. I also recommend you study them from reference as well. So now you can see how all the heads kind of came into being here. Let's do a quick girl head so that you can see the difference. The jawline is going to be softer. And you notice I'm doing stuff out of order because I can just kind of drop in whatever I want to drop in at this point because I've done it so many times. So nose line, ear line, we know that lines up. Little sharp, mean triangle eyes. The shape you start with is the shape that's going to really color a lot of the design later, so be sure to be conscientious of the shapes that you're starting with. You can use a slightly bigger M for the upper lip. And just shade that in real quick. Again, I'm sketching this all very quickly just for demonstration purposes. You don't have to go this fast, even though this is pretty close to live in terms of the editing. So I'm going to check this real quick just by flipping. I can already tell the eyes are a little off center. This one's a little big. Shrink that down. And she does not look like a very nice lady, which is fine. It's just what happened to come out this time. So nostril, draw a little shadow. See, I marked off the place my shadow was going to be, and you can do some wingtips or some eyebrows that are smaller to help it appear more feminine. And you can go ahead and kind of have a nice round, non-broken up jawline. Like these lines are all touching pretty nicely. You don't have quite as much room to have lines intersecting rough if you're drawing women. So flip and check. Coming up pretty good. And of course we haven't done hair, we haven't covered hair, but that'll be in another video, so you better like and subscribe and comment down below what other things you want to learn to draw, and we can definitely get you there. As we continue to ramp up the channel, check out thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com for much more in-depth tutorials and courses to help you stay focused and on point. And this has been Tay with thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com. I will see you in the next video. This is our female head here. Take care and happy drawing.